The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Brooks Industries' 42nd floor, each droplet a reminder of the storm brewing both outside and within the pristine conference room. Colton Brooks adjusted his Italian silk tie, his steel-gray eyes scanning the acquisition documents that would cement his position as the youngest billionaire to ever helm a Fortune 500 company. At 28, he had everything, except the one thing the board of directors deemed essential for a CEO handling family-oriented brands. A wife! The Hartwell account is worth $800 million. His father's voice crackled through the speakerphone, each word measured and calculating. But Victoria Hartwell won't do business with bachelors. She believes family men make more stable business partners. Colton's jaw tightened. 3 generations of Brooks men had built this empire, and now it hinged on his marital status. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals was being held hostage by his single status. 23 floors below, in the bustling marketing department, Nia Robinson was having her own crisis. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reread the email that had arrived that morning, like a death sentence wrapped in corporate letterhead. Due to budget restructuring, your position will be eliminated effective December 31st. We thank you for your 2 years of dedicated service. She closed her laptop with more force than necessary, earning concerned glances from her cubicle neighbors. 2 years of 60-hour weeks, innovative campaigns that had increased client retention by 30%, and a master's degree in marketing. None of it mattered when the quarterly reports demanded sacrifices. The elevator dinged softly as Nia stepped inside, clutching a box of her personal belongings. She'd cleared out her desk during lunch, unable to bear the pitying looks and whispered conversations. As the elevator climbed, she found herself thinking about her grandmother's words. Sometimes, baby girl, life don't give you what you deserve. Sometimes you gotta take what you need. The elevator shuddered to a halt on the 42nd floor, a floor she'd never had clearance to visit. The doors opened to reveal Colton Brooks himself, his presence commanding even in the confined space. Nia had seen him in company newsletters and business magazines, but in person he was different. More real, the carefully cultivated image of corporate perfection showed hairline cracks of exhaustion around his eyes. Going up? He asked, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. Actually, I was going down, Nia replied, then winced at how that sounded. I mean, to the parking garage. For the first time in weeks, Colton almost smiled. Rough day? Nia gestured to her box of belongings. You could say that. I just got laid off. The elevator continued its descent in silence until Colton spoke again. What department? Marketing. Nia Robinson. She extended her free hand, a gesture of politeness even in her darkest hour. Colton Brooks. His handshake was firm, warm. I'm sorry about your position. The restructuring wasn't my call, but you're the CEO. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. In title, yes, but every decision still requires board approval. There was something bitter in his voice, a frustration that Nia recognized in herself. The elevator reached the parking level, but neither moved to exit. In that moment, 2 desperate people found themselves suspended between floors and fates, each carrying burdens the other couldn't fully understand. Can I ask you something? Colton said suddenly. Hypothetically speaking, if someone needed to appear. Settled. For a business deal, what would you suggest? Nia studied his face, noting the careful way he'd phrased the question. Hypothetically? I'd say perception is everything in marketing. People see what you want them to see, as long as you're consistent with the narrative. And if that narrative involved partnership, the wheels in Nia's mind began turning with the speed that had made her one of the company's top marketers. Then I'd say the partnership would need to look authentic, believable. It would require someone who understands the stakes and can commit to the performance. They looked at each other in the fluorescent lighting of the parking garage elevator, 2 people who had just stumbled upon a solution to their respective problems. This is crazy, Nia whispered. Completely insane, Colton agreed. When would this hypothetical partnership need to begin? The Hartwell meeting is in 2 weeks. The board review is in 3 months. Nia's heart raced as she calculated her dwindling savings account against her monthly expenses. 3 months would give her time to find another position, maybe even negotiate a reference from Brooks Industries. It was a lifeline disguised as a business transaction. What would this hypothetical partner receive in return? A very generous consulting fee, health insurance, and a glowing recommendation for future endeavors. The elevator doors had long since closed again, carrying them back up toward the executive floors as if the building itself was giving them time to make this decision. "I need to think about this," Nia said, though they both knew she'd already decided. "Of course, here's my card. The private number is on the back." Colton handed her an elegantly embossed business card. "If you're interested in discussing this hypothetical partnership further, call me tonight." As the elevator opened on the 42nd floor, Colton stepped out, then turned back. "For what it's worth, Ms. Robinson, I reviewed your portfolio before the layoffs. Your work was exceptional. This company is making a mistake letting you go." The doors closed, leaving Nia alone with her thoughts and a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Nia's apartment had never felt smaller than it did that evening. She'd spread her bills across her kitchen table like tarot cards, each one predicting a different version of financial ruin. The business card sat in the center of it all, Colton Brooks's private number written in elegant script on the back. Her phone buzzed, a text from her best friend Maya. "How was your last day? Ready to celebrate your freedom?" Freedom. The word felt hollow when accompanied by an empty bank account and an uncertain future. Nia picked up the card, her fingers tracing the embossed lettering. She'd built her career on taking calculated risks, on understanding people and what motivated them. But this was uncharted territory. At 9:17 p.m., she dialed the number. "I was hoping you'd call." Colton's voice was different over the phone, less formal, more human. "I have conditions," Nia said, surprising herself with her directness. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." "Can we meet to discuss them? Somewhere private." They agreed on Meridian, an upscale restaurant where the lighting was dim enough for private conversations and the clientele wealthy, enough to mind their own business. Nia arrived first, wearing her best dress, a simple black number that had cost her a week's grocery money 2 years ago, but had been worth every penny. Colton slid into the booth across from her, and Nia noticed he'd changed from his business suit into dark jeans and a cashmere sweater. The casual attire made him seem more approachable, though no less magnetic. "Before we begin," Nia said, pulling out a legal pad, "I need to understand exactly what you're asking of me." "Direct, I like that." Colton signaled the waiter for wine. "The board expects their CEO to project stability. Marriage suggests commitment, responsibility. The Hartwell deal requires someone who understands family values. And you think a fake fiancé will solve this?" "I think the right partner, someone intelligent enough to navigate high-stakes social situations, could help us both achieve our goals." Nia made notes as he spoke, her marketing mind already mapping the campaign they'd need to orchestrate. "Timeline? We'd need to be engaged within the week. The Hartwell dinner is in 10 days. Board review in 3 months. Public appearances, company events, charity galas, family dinners. Nothing too intimate, but enough to establish the relationship as legitimate. Compensation." Colton named a figure that made Nia's pen skip across the page. It was more than her annual salary had been, paid over 3 months. And when it ends? Clean break, mutual decision to focus on career goals, no scandal, no drama. Nia set down her pen and studied his face in the candlelight. "Why me? You could hire an actress, someone with experience in performance. Because this isn't a performance for you, it's a business arrangement. You understand the stakes, and you won't confuse the transaction with genuine emotion." The wine arrived, providing a moment of pause as the sommelier performed his ritual. When they were alone again, Nia raised her glass. "To the most expensive consulting contract of my career." "To partnership," Colton corrected, touching his glass to hers. The next week passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like launching a military campaign than planning a fake engagement. They met daily, sometimes in his office, sometimes at neutral locations, building the mythology of their relationship. "How did we meet?" Nia asked during one of their sessions, her legal pad now filled with pages of fabricated history. "Company party, you spilled wine on my shirt." "That's cliché. What about the elevator?" "There's truth in that. Easier to remember under pressure." Colton nodded, making his own notes. "First date?" "Art museum." "You wanted to impress me with your cultural knowledge, but I knew more about the Impressionist collection than you did." "That's believable." "What's my favorite food?" "Thai, but you can't handle anything spicier than mild." "Your favorite flower?" "Peonies, but only the pale pink ones. They were building intimacy through inventory, creating shared experiences that had never happened. The strange thing was how easily it came, as if they'd known each other for years instead of days. The engagement ring was the final piece of their elaborate puzzle. Colton had suggested Tiffany, but Nia had a different idea. "It needs to look like something you'd actually choose for someone you love," she said, as they walked through the Diamond District. "Not something you'd buy to impress a board of directors." They found it in a small shop tucked between larger retailers, a vintage Art Deco setting with a center diamond that caught the light like captured starlight. When the jeweler slipped it onto Nia's finger, she felt a strange jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with static and everything to do with the way Colton was watching her face. "Perfect," he said softly, and for a moment neither of them was acting. The ring fit as if it had been made for her, and when she tried to remove it in the car afterward, Colton stopped her with a gentle touch. "Leave it on. We need to get used to it looking natural." That night, Nia found herself staring at the ring as she made dinner, twisting it around her finger in a gesture that felt both foreign and familiar. She'd caught herself doing it at least a dozen times throughout the day, each time remembering the warmth of Colton's hand as he'd slid it into place. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Colton's name appeared on the screen. "Second thoughts?" she answered. "Actually, I was calling to see how you were feeling about tomorrow." Tomorrow. Their first public appearance as an engaged couple. The Brooks Industries annual charity gala, where 500 guests would witness the debut of their carefully orchestrated romance. "Nervous," she admitted. "You, terrified." His honesty surprised her. In all their planning sessions, he'd maintained perfect composure, treating their arrangement like any other business deal. "What if someone sees through it?" Nia asked. "Then we adapt. That's what good partners do." Partners. The word had taken on layers of meaning over the past week, shifting from business terminology to something more complex. "Colton? Yes? What happens if this works too well, if people expect more?" There was a long pause before he answered. "Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." After they hung up, Nia tried on the dress she'd bought for the gala, a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves and made her feel like someone who belonged in Colton's world. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she realized that somewhere in the past week, the line between Nia Robinson, unemployed marketer, and Nia Robinson, billionaire's fiancée, had begun to blur. The woman looking back at her could handle charity galas and board meetings. She could stand beside Colton Brooks and make people believe in their love story. The question was, what would happen when she started believing in it herself? The Brooks Industries charity gala transformed the downtown hotel ballroom into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across silk-draped tables, and the city's elite mingled beneath spotlights that made everyone look like movie stars. Nia had attended marketing events before, but nothing had prepared her for this level of opulence. She adjusted the diamond bracelet Colton had insisted she wear, for authenticity, he'd said, and checked her reflection in the ladies' room mirror one final time. The woman staring back at her looked confident, poised, every inch the successful executive's fiancé. It was a masterful performance, and it hadn't even begun yet. "You look stunning." Nia turned to find Colton in the doorway, resplendent in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. He wasn't just handsome. He was magnetic, the kind of man who commanded attention simply by existing. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she managed, accepting his offered arm. "Ready for our debut?" As ready as one can be for elaborate deception. They paused at the ballroom entrance, and Colton's expression grew serious. "Once we walk through those doors, this becomes real. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this?" Nia looked out at the crowd of influential guests, then back at the man whose life she was about to enter. Too late for second thoughts now. Then let's give them a show. The moment they stepped into the ballroom, conversations quieted. Heads turned, whispers followed in their wake. Nia felt the weight of hundreds of eyes cataloging every detail, her dress, her posture, the way her hand rested in the crook of Colton's arm. "Colton!" A woman in an elaborate emerald gown approached, her smile sharp as cut glass. "You must introduce me to this vision. Victoria Hartwell. I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Nia Robinson. Nia. Victoria is the CEO of Hartwell Enterprises." This was it, the woman whose $800 million account hinged on Colton's perceived stability. Nia extended her hand with practiced grace. "Mrs. Hartwell, it's such a pleasure. Colton speaks of you constantly." "Oh, does he now?" Victoria's eyes glittered with interest. "And how long have you two been engaged?" "Just over a week," Nia replied, letting a blush touch her cheeks. "We wanted to keep it private at first, but Colton insisted on showing me off tonight." She felt Colton's arm tighten slightly against hers. Surprise at her improvisation or approval? "How romantic. Tell me, dear, what do you do?" "I'm between positions at the moment, actually. I was head of marketing at a boutique consulting firm, but I'm taking some time to focus on wedding planning." "And supporting Colton, of course." It was a perfect answer. It explained any background checks while positioning her as devoted to their relationship. Victoria practically beamed. "Family first, I always say. Too many young women today prioritize career over love. You're wise to recognize what truly matters." As Victoria moved on to other guests, Colton leaned close to Nia's ear. Brilliant improvisation, just following the client's lead. The rest of the evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. They worked the room together, Colton's hand never straying far from the small of Nia's back, her fingers occasionally finding his arm in gestures of casual intimacy. They told their rehearsed story to curious guests, each repetition making it feel more real. During dinner, Nia found herself genuinely laughing at Colton's whispered commentary about the other guests. He had a dry wit she hadn't expected, and an uncanny ability to read people that matched her own. "The woman in the red dress?" he murmured as the salad course arrived. "Divorce attorney?" "Recent client was the senator's wife." "How do you know that?" "She keeps checking her phone under the table, and her smile doesn't reach her eyes when she talks to married couples." "And the man by the bar?" Nia studied him briefly. "Old money, but running out. Designer tuxedo, but his shoes are resoled. He's here looking for investors." "Impressive. What about me? What do you see?" The question caught her off guard. She turned to study his profile as he spoke with the couple at their table, noting the way he automatically adjusted his posture. When business was mentioned, how his smile became more genuine when talking about charity work. "You're not as comfortable with this world as you pretend to be," she said quietly. "You'd rather be in your office working on something real than making small talk with people who only care about what you can do for them." Colton's fork paused halfway to his mouth. And you're lonely. Despite being surrounded by hundreds of people who want something from you, you're completely alone." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment the performance fell away entirely. He was just Colton, and she was just Nia, two people who had somehow seen through each other's carefully constructed facades. "May I have everyone's attention?" The master of ceremonies tapped his champagne flute, and the room gradually quieted. "Our host, Mr. Colton Brooks, would like to say a few words." Colton rose, commanding the room's attention effortlessly. "Thank you all for joining us tonight in support of the Children's Education Foundation. Your generosity will provide scholarships for underprivileged students across the city." He paused, his eyes finding Nia in the crowd. "This evening is particularly special for me because I have the privilege of sharing it with the woman I love." "Nia, would you join me?" This wasn't part of the plan. They hadn't discussed public declarations or speeches, but Nia found herself rising, accepting his outstretched hand, allowing him to draw her to his side in front of 500 people. "I met Nia in the most unlikely place, an elevator," Colton continued, his arms circling her waist. "She was having the worst day of her life, and somehow she made mine infinitely better. Tonight, in front of all our friends and colleagues, I want to tell her something I should have said weeks ago." He turned to face her fully, and Nia's heart began to race. This was still performance, wasn't it? But the way he was looking at her, the slight tremor in his voice, it felt real. "Nia Robinson, you are the smartest, most beautiful, most extraordinary woman I've ever met. You challenge me, support me, and make me want to be worthy of your love. I can't imagine my life without you in it." The room erupted in applause, but Nia barely heard it. She was drowning in the intensity of Colton's gaze, in the way his thumb was tracing circles on her hand, in the dangerous flutter of possibility blooming in her chest. When he kissed her, soft, brief, achingly tender, she forgot about the audience, forgot about the arrangement, forgot about everything except the warmth of his lips and the way her entire world seemed to shift on its axis. As they broke apart, she saw something in his eyes that terrified her. He wasn't acting anymore. Neither was she. Later, in the quiet of his car as they drove through the city, Nia stared out the window and tried to process what had happened. "That went well," Colton said, his voice carefully neutral. "The Hartwell account?" "Secured. She wants to move forward with the partnership." "Good. That's good." They drove in silence for several blocks before Colton pulled over outside her apartment building. "Nia, about what happened back there." "It was perfect," she interrupted, not ready for whatever he was about to say. "Very convincing. The whole room believed it. Did you?" The question hung between them like a challenge, like a confession, like a prayer. Nia reached for the door handle without answering. "I'll see you tomorrow for the venue walkthrough." She was halfway to her building when she heard him call her name. She turned to see him standing beside his car, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever imagined the great Colton Brooks could look. "For what it's worth," he said, his voice carrying across the empty street. "I meant every word." Nia's breath caught in her throat, but she forced herself to smile. The same practiced smile she'd perfected for the evening's performance. "Good night, Colton." She didn't look back as she entered her building, but she could feel him watching her until the elevator doors closed. Only then did she allow herself to touch her lips, still tingling from a kiss that was supposed to be fake but had felt more real than anything in her life. The engagement ring caught the hallway light as she fumbled with her keys, and for the first time since putting it on, she didn't want to take it off. The wedding venue was a masterpiece of architectural elegance. Soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, and enough space to accommodate the 500 guests expected at what would be the social event of the season. If it were real, Nia stood in the center of the main hall, watching Colton discuss logistics with the wedding planner, and felt the weight of their deception settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. In the 3 weeks since the charity gala, their fake relationship had taken on a life of its own. Engagement photos for society magazines, couples dinners with his parents, shopping trips for a wedding dress she'd never wear, each event making their web of lies more elaborate and harder to escape. "The ceremony will take place here." The wedding planner, a meticulously organized woman named Patricia, gestured toward the windows. "With the harbor as your backdrop, it will be absolutely magical. Magical." The word twisted in Nia's chest. She'd dreamed of her wedding day since childhood, a simple ceremony surrounded by people who loved her, not a performance for people who barely knew her name. "And for the reception," Patricia continued, "we'll have the jazz quartet here, the cocktail station there, and the head table positioned so you'll have the best view of your guests." "It sounds perfect," Colton said, but his voice lacked the enthusiasm of a groom-to-be. He'd been distant since the charity gala, polite but careful, as if he was trying to maintain professional boundaries, in an increasingly unprofessional situation. "Now, let's discuss the timeline." Patricia flipped through her portfolio. "The ceremony is in 8 weeks, which gives us just enough time for final fittings, menu tastings, and—" "8 weeks?" Nia's voice came out sharper than intended. "I thought we had more time." Patricia looked confused, but Mr. Brooks specified that the wedding needed to happen before the board review. "I assumed you were both eager to make it official." Official, another word that felt like a knife between her ribs. Nothing about this was official except the contract they'd signed, the one that would dissolve their arrangement the moment Colton secured his position. "Of course," Nia recovered. "I just 8 weeks feels so soon." "Pre-wedding jitters," Colton said smoothly, moving to her side. His hand found the small of her back, a gesture that had become automatic over the past weeks. "She's nervous about walking down the aisle." The casual lie fell so easily from his lips that Nia had to fight not to flinch. When had they become so good at deceiving everyone, including themselves? After Patricia left them with catalogs of centerpieces and menu options, they sat in the empty venue's cafe, surrounded by the detritus of their fake wedding planning. "You're quiet," Colton observed, stirring his coffee absently. "Just tired. This is more intensive than I expected. We can hire someone to handle the details. Patricia can make most of the decisions without us." "That's not the point." Nia closed the cake catalog with more force than necessary. "This feels wrong, Colton, all of it. Having second thoughts about our arrangement?" "Our arrangement, even now, he couldn't call it what it had become, a lie so complete that sometimes she forgot where the performance ended and her real feelings began." Aren't you? She met his eyes across the small table. When you talk to your parents about me, when you tell Patricia about our dream wedding, when you introduce me as your fiancé, doesn't part of you feel guilty? Colton was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a nervous rhythm she'd learned to recognize. Every day, he said finally. But what's the alternative? Tell the board I fabricated an engagement to secure a business deal? Watch 3 generations of family legacy crumble because I couldn't convince them I was stable enough to lead the company? What about after? When the board review is over and we end this, what happens to all these people who invested in our story? Your parents have already started planning visits with our imaginary future children. The words hung between them like an accusation. Over the past weeks, they'd been absorbed into each other's lives so completely that sometimes Nia forgot this was temporary. Colton's mother called her weekly to discuss wedding details and share family stories. His father had begun including her in business conversations, valuing her marketing insights. Even his younger sister Emma had started texting her directly, excited to have a future sister-in-law. "We'll figure it out," Colton said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Will we? Or will we just add more lies to cover up the original lie until we can't remember what was real anymore?" Colton's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to say, Nia? That I regret asking for your help? That I should have found another way? I want you to acknowledge that this has gotten complicated." "Of course it's complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated." "Worthwhile?" The word escaped before she could stop it. "Is that what this is to you?" Their eyes met across the table, and Nia saw her own confusion reflected in his face. The careful boundaries they'd established were crumbling, eroded by weeks of shared intimacy that felt real even when it wasn't. "I don't know what this is anymore," he admitted quietly. Before Nia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Coffee tomorrow? I feel like I haven't seen you in weeks. How's the whirlwind romance, the whirlwind romance?" If only Maya knew that the romance was a business transaction, and the whirlwind was guilt, confusion, and feelings she wasn't allowed to have. "I should go," Nia said, gathering her purse. "I'm having lunch with my friend tomorrow, and I need to prepare my story." "Your story?" "About us. About how happy we are. About how I can't wait to marry you." She stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that weren't quite steady. Another performance for another audience. She was halfway to the door when Colton caught her arm. "Nia, wait." "What?" For a moment, he looked like he was about to say something important, something that might change everything between them. Then his expression shuddered. "Drive safely." The next day, Nia found herself across from Maya at their favorite cafe, struggling to maintain the facade of the happy bride-to-be. "You're glowing," Maya announced, studying her with the intensity of a scientist. "Seriously, whatever this Colton guy is doing, it's working. You look like you're in love." In love. The words hit Nia like a physical blow, because she was terrified they might be true. "It's just new relationship energy," she said, focusing on her latte. "Girl, please. I've seen you in new relationships. This is different. You're different." Maya leaned forward conspiratorially. "Is the sex amazing?" "I bet it's amazing. He has that look." "Maya." "What? I'm just saying, the man is fine as hell and you're practically vibrating with satisfaction. Good for you." If only Maya knew that she and Colton had never so much as kissed outside of public appearances, that they'd never been alone together in anything resembling an intimate setting, that their entire relationship was built on carefully negotiated performances. "Tell me about the wedding planning," Maya continued. "I can't believe you're getting married in 8 weeks. That's so unlike you. You usually plan everything to death." "Sometimes you just know," Nia said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "When it's right, why wait? And his family? What are they like?" This at least Nia could answer honestly. "They're wonderful, warm, welcoming. His mother, Catherine, is this amazing woman who runs her own foundation. She's been sharing all these stories about Colton as a child, showing me family photos. That's so sweet. It sounds like they've really embraced you, embraced her based on a lie." Catherine Brooks had spent last Sunday afternoon teaching Nia how to make Colton's favorite dessert, lemon bars that he'd apparently loved since childhood. She'd shared stories about his first heartbreak, his college graduation, the night he'd called her crying after his grandfather's death. Real stories about the real Colton, stories that Nia had no right to know. What about your dress? Maya asked. Please tell me you're not doing some Pinterest perfect princess thing. You're too sophisticated for that. Nia thought about the dress hanging in her closet, a simple but elegant design that had made her breath catch when she'd tried it on. The saleswoman had gushed about how perfect it was, how it had been made for her. Even Patricia had teared up when she'd seen it. It's perfect, she said, and meant it. I'm so happy for you. Maya reached across the table to squeeze her hand. You deserve this, Nia. After all the guys who didn't appreciate how incredible you are, you found someone who sees you clearly. Sees you clearly? The irony was devastating. Colton saw her clearly enough to know she'd make a convincing fake fiancée. But did he see her as anything more than a talented actress playing a role? I should go, Nia said abruptly, standing to gather her purse. Wedding errands. Of course. Don't forget to send me the registry information. I want to get you something special. As Nia walked to her car, Maya's words echoed in her head. You deserve this. But she didn't deserve this. She was stealing it, borrowing someone else's happiness for a few months before returning to her real life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Colton. Dinner with my parents tonight. Can you be there by 7? Another performance, another evening of pretending to be blissfully in love with a man who was paying her to lie to his family. She typed back, of course. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. Mom's making your favorite. Your favorite. Somehow, over the past weeks, Catherine had learned that Nia preferred white wine to red, that she was allergic to shellfish. As Nia drove toward the Brooks family estate, she realized that Maya had been right about one thing. She was different. The question was whether she was becoming the woman Colton needed her to be, or simply becoming a woman who was falling in love with someone she could never truly have. The Brooks family estate at sunset was something from a magazine spread, sprawling gardens, warm light spilling from tall windows, the kind of generational wealth that whispered, not shouted. Nia had been here dozens of times over the past month, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of their deception seemed heavier, more suffocating. Catherine Brooks opened the door before Nia could ring the bell, enveloping her in the kind of maternal hug that Nia had been craving since her own grandmother's death 3 years earlier. Sweetheart, you look tired. Are you getting enough sleep? Wedding planning can be so overwhelming. I'm fine, Catherine. Just a lot on my mind. Of course, dear. Come, dinner's almost ready. Colton's in the study with his father. They're discussing some business matter that couldn't wait until tomorrow. Business. Always business with the Brooks men, even during family dinners. Nia followed Catherine through the familiar hallways, past family portraits that now included engagement photos of her and Colton. Seeing their smiling faces on the wall among generations of real Brooks family moments made her stomach clench with guilt. In the kitchen, Catherine handed Nia a glass of wine, the Sauvignon Blanc she'd mentioned preferring weeks ago. I wanted to talk to you before the men join us, Catherine said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. About Colton. Nia's heart rate spiked. Is everything all right? He's different since you came into his life. Happier, but also, I don't know how to explain it. More conflicted? Catherine studied Nia's face as if searching for answers. Has he seemed troubled to you lately? The wine turned sour in Nia's mouth. Of course he seemed conflicted. He was living a lie that grew more complex every day, pretending to love a woman he'd hired to play a role. Maybe he's just nervous about the wedding, Nia offered weakly. Catherine's laugh was gentle but knowing. Oh, my dear, I've been married for 32 years. I know the difference between wedding nerves and something deeper. She reached across to cover Nia's hand with her own. He loves you desperately, you know. But he's terrified. Terrified? The word came out as a whisper. Of losing you. Of not being worthy of you. Of the possibility that this happiness might be temporary. Catherine's eyes were soft with maternal wisdom. He's never been in love before. Not really. He doesn't trust it yet. The kitchen door opened, saving Nia from having to respond to Catherine's devastating assessment. Colton and his father entered, their conversation trailing off when they saw the two women. Business can wait, gentlemen, Catherine announced, standing to check the roast. Tonight is about family. Dinner passed in a blur of conversation about wedding details, honeymoon plans, and family traditions. Nia played her part perfectly, laughing at the right moments, sharing stories that painted her as the devoted fiancée. But beneath the surface, Catherine's words echoed like a warning bell. He loves you desperately. After dessert, Colton's father excused himself to take a business call, and Catherine disappeared to package leftovers for them to take home. For the first time all evening, Nia and Colton were alone. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, refilling her wineglass. "Your mother thinks you're conflicted about something." Colton's hand stilled. "What did she say?" "That you seem torn, fighting with yourself." Nia met his eyes. "She thinks you're terrified of losing me." "My mother has always been perceptive." "Colton." Nia's voice was barely above a whisper. "What are we doing?" Before he could answer, Catherine returned with containers of food and a photo album Nia had never seen before. "I wanted to show you these," Catherine said, settling beside them on the sofa. "Pictures from when Colton was little. I thought you might want copies for your wedding slideshow." The album was a treasure trove of Colton's childhood. Gap-toothed grins, Little League uniforms, Christmas mornings. But it was the later photos that made Nia's chest tighten. High school graduation, where his smile didn't reach his eyes. College photos where he looked isolated, despite being surrounded by friends. Corporate headshots that showed a successful man who seemed utterly alone. "He was always so serious," Catherine murmured, turning to a photo of teenage Colton in a tuxedo at some formal event. "Even as a child, he felt the weight of family expectations. I used to worry he'd never find someone who could make him laugh." She looked up at Nia with such genuine affection that it felt like a physical blow. "Thank you for giving me my son back. The Colton I see now, the one who smiles when he talks about you, who actually looks forward to something other than work. That's the boy I always knew was in there." Nia excused herself to the bathroom, needing a moment to collect herself. But as she passed Colton's childhood bedroom, she heard voices from downstairs, Catherine and Colton talking in the living room. "She's perfect for you," Catherine was saying. "I've never seen you so happy." "Mom." "No, let me finish. I know you think you don't deserve happiness, that you have to earn everything through work and sacrifice. But love isn't a business transaction, sweetheart. You can't negotiate your way into it, and you can't control its outcome." There was a long pause before Colton spoke. "What if I mess it up? What if I'm not capable of being what she needs?" "Then you figure it out together. That's what marriage is. Two people choosing each other every day, even when it's hard." Nia pressed her back against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. The raw vulnerability in Colton's voice, the genuine fear, this wasn't about their arrangement anymore. Somehow, without either of them meaning for it to happen, their fake engagement had become real for him too. When she returned downstairs, Colton was helping his mother clean up, and the moment of honesty had passed. They said their goodbyes with hugs and promises to call soon, carrying their leftovers and the weight of unspoken truths to Colton's car. They drove in silence through the tree-lined streets of his parents' neighborhood, past houses that glowed with the warmth of real families living real lives. When Colton finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "My mother likes you. She loves me because she thinks I love you. Don't you?" The question hung in the air between them like a confession, like an accusation, like a plea. Nia stared out the window at the passing lights, each one blurring into the next. "This isn't about what I feel, Colton. It's about what we agreed to do. And if I wanted to change what we agreed to?" Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere between the elevator and tonight, this stopped being about the Hartwell account or the board review." He pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face her, his eyes intense in the dashboard light. "I'm saying that when I told you I loved you at the charity gala, I wasn't acting." The words hit her like a physical force. For weeks, she'd been telling herself that the growing intimacy between them was just good performance, that the way her heart raced when he touched her was simply her body responding to an attractive man. But hearing him say it, hearing the raw honesty in his voice, shattered every defense she'd built. "You don't mean that?" she whispered. "I do. I mean every word of it." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with a familiarity that spoke of weeks of practiced intimacy that had somehow become real. "I love the way you see through people's facades. I love how you can make my mother laugh until she cries. I love that you're brave enough to take risks, smart enough to succeed at anything you try, and stubborn enough to call me out when I'm being an ass." "Colton, stop. I love that you steal the blankets in your sleep. We've never slept in the same bed. And that you sing off-key in the car when you think I'm not listening. I love that you order dessert first when you're stressed, and that you cry at commercials with dogs in them. Each declaration felt like another crack in the foundation of their careful arrangement. How had he learned these things about her? When had she become so transparent to him? This is just proximity, Naya said desperately. Spending so much time together building this fake intimacy, it's natural that feelings would get confused. Look me in the eye and tell me you don't feel it too. She couldn't. God help her. She couldn't look at this man who had somehow seen past every wall she'd built and lied to his face. It doesn't matter what I feel, she said instead. In 6 weeks, I'm going to walk down that aisle knowing it's a lie. In 3 months, we're going to end this engagement and go back to our separate lives. That was the deal. Deals can be renegotiated. Not this one. She pulled her hand from his, immediately missing the warmth. Your parents, your sister, my friends, everyone believes in us. When this ends, it's going to hurt them. But at least it will end cleanly, the way we planned. And if I don't want it to end? The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke her resolve. But she'd seen what happened when people let hope overrule logic, when they let their hearts make decisions their heads couldn't support. Then you'll change your mind when the novelty wears off and you remember that you hired me for a job, not a life. She saw him flinch as if she'd slapped him, but she forced herself to continue. Drive me home, Colton, please. The rest of the drive passed in heavy silence. When he pulled up outside her apartment building, neither of them moved to get out. For what it's worth, Colton said finally, you were never just a job to me. Nia's throat tightened, but she made herself open the car door. Good night, Colton. She was halfway to her building when she heard her name. She turned to find him standing beside his car, looking more lost than she'd ever seen him. The board review is in 5 weeks, he called out. After that, if you still want to end this, I won't fight you. But give me until then to prove that what we have is real. And if you can't, then I'll let you go. Nia nodded once, not trusting her voice, and disappeared into her building. But as the elevator carried her to her floor, she realized that the most terrifying part wasn't the possibility that Colton would fail to convince her. It was the possibility that he'd succeed. The wedding dress hung in Nia's closet like a beautiful ghost, its ivory silk catching the morning light that streamed through her bedroom window. 3 weeks until the wedding that would never happen, 2 weeks until the board review that would end their arrangement, and she was falling apart. Her phone buzzed with another text from the wedding planner. Final headcount needed by Friday. Caterer requires 48-hour notice for any changes. Headcount for a fake wedding. Menu selections for a reception that would never happen. She'd become the star of an elaborate production that felt more real than her actual life. The engagement ring caught the light as she reached for her coffee, and she twisted it absently, a nervous habit that had developed over the past month. Such a beautiful lie sitting on her finger like a promise that would never be kept. Her laptop chimed with an email from a potential employer, a marketing firm in Portland that had been courting her for weeks. The salary was excellent, the position challenging, and it would take her 3,000 miles away from Colton Brooks and the wreckage of whatever they'd built together. She should accept it. Pack up her life, disappear into a new city, and a fresh start. Leave before the board review, before the fake wedding, before she did something irreversibly stupid like tell him she loved him too. Because she did. God help her, she was desperately, hopelessly in love with a man who had hired her to pretend to love him. The irony would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. Her phone rang, interrupting her spiral of self-pity. Colton's name appeared on the screen, and her heart did the same stupid flutter it had been doing for weeks. Good morning, she answered, forcing lightness into her voice. Are you free for lunch? There's something I want to show you. Colton, if this is about last night, it's not. Well, not entirely. Please, Naya. 1 hour. An hour later, she found herself in Colton's car, driving through neighborhoods she didn't recognize. He seemed nervous, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel in that telltale rhythm. Where are we going? You'll see. They pulled up in front of a charming Victorian house with a for sale sign in the front yard. The property was stunning. Mature trees, a wraparound porch, the kind of character that modern constructions could never replicate. Why are we here? Nia asked as they walked up the front path. I wanted your opinion on something. Colton produced a key from his pocket. I'm thinking of buying it. The interior was even more beautiful than the exterior. Original hardwood floors, built-in bookcases, a kitchen that managed to be both historic and modern. Sunlight poured through tall windows. and Nia could imagine the space filled with laughter, with life, with the kind of happiness she'd never allowed herself to dream about. "It's gorgeous," she said, running her fingers along the marble countertop. "But it's so different from your penthouse. This is a family home." "I know." Colton leaned against the kitchen island, watching her explore. "That's why I wanted to see it with you." The words hung in the air like a dare, like a promise, like a threat. Nia forced herself to keep walking, to examine the details of crown molding and original fixtures rather than look at the man, who was quietly dismantling every defense she had. "The master bedroom has amazing natural light," he said, leading her upstairs. The bedroom was spectacular: vaulted ceilings, a fireplace, French doors that opened onto a small balcony overlooking the garden. But it was the way Colton was watching her face, cataloging her reactions, that made her chest tighten with dangerous possibility. "There's an office space that would be perfect for your marketing consultancy," he continued, opening another door. "And the third bedroom could be a nursery, eventually." "Colton," her voice came out strangled. "What are you doing?" "I'm trying to show you what our life could look like, if you wanted it to be real." She spun to face him, anger and fear and hope warring in her chest. "This isn't fair. None of this has been fair. Not from the moment we stepped into that elevator." He moved closer, and she could see the same conflict in his eyes that had been tearing her apart for weeks. "But fair doesn't matter anymore, does it? What matters is what we choose to do next. We choose to stick to our agreement. 2 more weeks, and this ends cleanly. Look around this room, Nia. Look at this house. Tell me you can't see us here." But she could see it, with devastating clarity. She could see lazy Sunday mornings in the 4-poster bed, could imagine hosting dinner parties in the elegant dining room, could picture children's toys scattered across the hardwood floors. She could see a life that was everything she'd ever wanted, and nothing she'd ever thought she could have. "I can see it," she whispered. "That's the problem. Then why are you so determined to walk away?" "Because none of this started honestly." The words exploded out of her, months of suppressed emotion finally finding their voice. "You hired me, Colton. You offered me money to pretend to love you. What kind of foundation is that for a real relationship?" "A complicated one, but not necessarily a weak one." "How can you say that? How can you build something real on something so fundamentally dishonest?" Colton was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but certain. "Do you know why I really chose you that day in the elevator?" "Because I was convenient. Desperate. Available. Because you were the first person in years who looked at me and saw past the money and the title to something real underneath." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "You were having the worst day of your life, but you still had the strength to be kind to a stranger. You were brilliant and brave and broken, and I recognized something in you that I'd never seen in anyone else." "What?" "Someone who understood what it felt like to be alone in a room full of people." The words hit her like a physical blow, because they were true. She had understood from that first moment in the elevator. They'd recognized each other across the divide of their different lives, 2 people wearing masks that were slowly suffocating them. "The engagement was supposed to be business," Colton continued. "But falling in love with you, that was never part of any plan. That was just inevitable." "Love isn't inevitable," Nia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Then explain why I know that you hum when you're concentrating. Explain why you carry Band-Aids in your purse because you saw a child fall at the park 6 months ago and felt guilty for not being prepared to help. Explain why you cry every time we drive past the animal shelter because you want to adopt every dog, but your lease won't allow pets." Each observation felt like another layer of armor being stripped away. How had he learned these things? When had she become so transparent to him? "Explain why," he said, moving close enough to touch her face. "You're crying right now." She hadn't realized tears were falling, but his thumb was gentle as it wiped them away. The gesture was so tender, so careful, that it nearly brought her to her knees. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what? Of believing in this? Of letting myself want something that might be taken away? What if it's not taken away? What if it's just offered freely, with no conditions and no contracts?" Before she could answer, his phone rang. The harsh sound shattered the moment, and Colton stepped away to answer it. "Brooks." His voice shifted to business mode so quickly it gave her whiplash. What do you mean pushed up? That's impossible. Nia watched his expression change from confusion to resignation to something that looked like panic. I understand. Yes, I'll be there. He hung up and turned to her with an expression she couldn't read. The board review has been moved up. It's tomorrow. Tomorrow? But emergency meeting. Apparently there are some concerns about the Hartwell acquisition that need to be addressed immediately. Tomorrow. All their careful planning, all their preparation, and it was happening tomorrow. The meeting that would determine Colton's future, that would officially end their arrangement, that would force them to decide what came next. We should go, Nia said, already moving toward the stairs. You need to prepare. Nia, wait. He caught her hand at the top of the staircase. What I said about this house, about us. Let's get through tomorrow first, she interrupted. Then we can talk about everything else. But as they drove back toward the city, Nia realized that tomorrow would change everything. One way or another, the careful balance they'd maintained for months was about to shatter completely. The question was whether they'd be able to put the pieces back together into something real, or whether the explosion would destroy them both. The Brooks Industries boardroom had never felt more imposing than it did at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning that would determine the course of Colton's life. 12 members of the board sat around the mahogany conference table, their expressions ranging from supportive to skeptical to openly hostile. At the head of the table, his father maintained the neutral expression that had made him a formidable businessman for 3 decades. Nia sat in the gallery section, officially there as Colton's fiancée, but she felt more like a fraud than she ever had. Her engagement ring felt heavy on her finger, a constant reminder that she was the final piece in an elaborate deception. Before we begin the formal review, announced Margaret Chen, the board's lead independent director, I believe congratulations are in order. Mr. Brooks, we understand you'll be married in just 2 weeks. That's correct, Colton replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. And Ms. Robinson, Margaret turned her attention to Nia, we're delighted to welcome you to the Brooks family. It's wonderful to see Colton so settled and happy. Settled and happy, if only they knew how unsettled everything really was. The review proceeded systematically through Colton's achievements over the past year. Revenue increases, successful acquisitions, strategic partnerships that had strengthened the company's position in multiple markets. The Hartwell account featured prominently, with Victoria Hartwell herself participating via video conference to praise Colton's leadership and vision. The partnership with Brooks Industries has exceeded our expectations, Victoria said from her corporate office. Colton's commitment to family values and long-term thinking aligns perfectly with our company culture. We're looking forward to many years of collaboration. Everything was going perfectly. The board members nodded approvingly, making notes that Nia was certain were positive. Colton's presentation was flawless, his responses to their questions confident and thorough. He was going to succeed, just as they'd planned. So why did Nia feel like she was watching a train wreck in slow motion? Now, Margaret said as the formal review concluded, I believe Mr. Brooks has something he'd like to share with us. This wasn't part of the plan. Colton was supposed to answer their questions, receive their approval, and move forward as the confirmed CEO. There hadn't been any mention of additional comments. Colton stood, and Nia noticed his hands were trembling slightly. Thank you all for your confidence in my leadership. Before we conclude, there's something I need to tell you. Something that will affect your decision about my future with this company. The room went completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause, waiting for whatever bombshell Colton was about to drop. 3 months ago, I entered into an arrangement that I believed was necessary for the success of this company. Specifically for securing the Hartwell account. His eyes found Nia's across the room, and she saw something in them that made her blood freeze. I hired Ms. Robinson to pose as my fiancée. The silence that followed was deafening. Nia felt the blood drain from her face as 12 pairs of eyes turned toward her, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock to barely contained fury. I beg your pardon? Margaret's voice could have cut glass. Our engagement was a business arrangement, Colton continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. I believed that appearing settled and committed would give me an advantage with family-oriented accounts like Hartwell. Ms. Robinson agreed to play the role of my fiancé in exchange for financial compensation. Are you telling us, his father's voice was dangerously quiet, that this entire relationship has been fabricated? Initially, yes. Nia couldn't breathe. The walls of the boardroom felt like they were closing in, and she could hear her heart pounding in her ears. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. However, Colton said, and something in his tone made everyone lean forward. What began as a business arrangement became something else entirely. Somewhere between the charity gala and this morning, I fell in love with Nia Robinson. Not the woman I hired to play a role, but the woman herself. Brilliant, compassionate, strong enough to call me out when I'm wrong and brave enough to take risks when they matter. He turned to face Nia directly, and the raw honesty in his expression nearly brought her to her knees. I fell in love with someone who sees past the fortune and the title to the man underneath. Someone who makes me want to be worthy of her love, not because of what I can give her, but because of who she is. Mr. Brooks, Margaret's voice cut through the moment like a scalpel. Are you seriously telling us that you built your engagement strategy on a lie? I'm telling you that I started with a lie and found the truth. And what about the Hartwell account? Was Mrs. Hartwell informed that she was being deceived? No, she wasn't, and that's on me, not on Nia. This was my decision, my deception. She was simply helping me with what she thought was a temporary business problem. The board members began talking among themselves in urgent whispers. Aya caught fragments of their conversations: integrity, deception, grounds for dismissal. Ms. Robinson, Margaret's voice cut through the chaos. Would you care to comment on these allegations? Nia stood on unsteady legs, her mind reeling. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of this room before the situation got worse. But Colton had just destroyed his career to tell the truth about their relationship. The least she could do was own her part in it. Mr. Brooks is telling the truth, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I agreed to pose as his fiancée in exchange for financial compensation, but he's also right about something else. What started as a business arrangement became real. I fell in love with him too. The admission hung in the air like a confession, like an absolution, like a declaration of war. So this wedding that's planned for 2 weeks from now, Margaret continued, is that real or fabricated as well? Nia and Colton looked at each other across the room, and she saw her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. They'd been so focused on the board review that they'd never discussed what would happen to their actual wedding. That depends, Colton said finally, on whether the woman I love will have me, knowing what this confession might cost us both. The question was directed at the board, but his eyes never left Nia's face. In that moment, she realized that he'd just done something extraordinary. He'd chosen honesty over success, truth over security. He'd risked everything he'd worked for to clear the air between them. I need a moment, Margaret announced. Board members, please join me in the conference room next door. Mr. Brooks, Ms. Robinson, please wait here. The board filed out, leaving Nia and Colton alone in the vast room that had just witnessed the implosion of their carefully constructed deception. Are you insane? Nia whispered once the door closed. You just confessed to corporate fraud in front of 12 people. I confess to being human, to making mistakes and learning from them. They're going to fire you. They're going to destroy your reputation. Maybe, probably. Colton moved closer, and she could see that despite his calm exterior, he was terrified. But I couldn't spend the rest of my life building a career on a lie, and I couldn't let you think that what we have isn't real. What we have is going to cost you everything your family built. My family built a company based on integrity and innovation. If I'd continued the deception, I would have betrayed those values far more than I betrayed them by starting it. The conference room door opened, and the board members returned to their seats. Margaret's expression was unreadable as she called the meeting back to order. Mr. Brooks, the board has reached a decision regarding your continued leadership of this company. Colton straightened, accepting whatever judgment was coming. Your actions over the past 3 months show a serious lapse in judgment. Deception of this magnitude, regardless of the outcome, reflects poorly on your character and on this company. Nia closed her eyes, unable to watch Colton's world crumble because of a decision they'd made together. However, Margaret continued, and Nia's eyes snapped open, your decision to come forward today, to prioritize honesty over personal gain, demonstrates the kind of integrity we expect from our leadership. The board has voted to censure you officially, but to maintain your position as CEO. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Nia felt her knees go weak with relief. There are conditions, Margaret added sternly. First, you will personally contact Victoria Hartwell to explain the situation and allow her to make an informed decision, about continuing the partnership. Second, you will undergo leadership coaching for the next year to ensure this kind of judgment lapse doesn't occur again. Third, your compensation will be reduced by 20% for the next 2 years as penalty for your deception. I understand and accept those conditions, Colton said immediately. And finally, Margaret's expression softened slightly. If this relationship is as real as you claim it to be, we expect to see you both at that wedding in 2 weeks. This company needs leaders who understand the value of authentic commitment. As the board members began to disperse, Nia realized that everything had changed. The careful walls they'd built around their arrangement had crumbled completely, leaving only the truth. 2 people who had found love in the most unlikely place and were brave enough to fight for it. Colton approached her slowly, as if she might disappear if he moved too quickly. So, he said quietly, in 2 weeks, there's going to be a wedding venue, flowers, 500 guests, and a beautiful dress waiting for a bride. Is that a proposal, Mr. Brooks? It's a question, Ms. Robinson. The same question I asked you 3 months ago in an elevator, just with different stakes. His voice was soft, vulnerable, completely without the confidence that had first attracted her to him. Will you take a chance on me? Not on a contract or an arrangement, but on us? Nia looked at this man who had just risked everything he'd worked for to tell the truth, who had chosen her over his career security, who was offering her not just his name, but his whole imperfect, complicated, beautiful heart. Ask me properly, she whispered. Colton dropped to one knee right there in the boardroom, in front of the remaining board members, in front of his father, in front of anyone who cared to watch. He took her left hand, where his grandmother's ring already sat, like it had always belonged there. Nia Robinson, you are the smartest, strongest, most extraordinary woman I've ever known. You've made me braver, better, more honest than I ever thought I could be. I love your terrible singing voice and your soft heart. I love the way you see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. I love that you took a chance on a desperate man in an elevator and somehow made him worthy of your love. His voice broke slightly, and Nia realized she was crying. Will you marry me, not because of a contract or a deal, but because you love me too? Will you build a life with me, in that beautiful house with the garden, and help me become the man you see when you look at me? Through her tears, Nia could see their future stretching out before them, messy and uncertain and absolutely real. She could see Sunday mornings and family dinners and fights that ended in forgiveness. She could see children with Colton's eyes and her stubborn streak, could see growing old together in rocking chairs on that wraparound porch. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, I'll marry you, Colton Brooks. As he slipped the ring off and back onto her finger, a gesture that somehow made it more real than all the months she'd worn it before, she realized that sometimes the best love stories began with the worst lies. Sometimes you had to lose yourself completely before you could find the person you were meant to be. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone brave enough to take that journey with you. 2 years later, the kitchen of their Victorian house smelled like lemon bars and possibility. Nia stood at the marble island, following Catherine's handwritten recipe while Colton attempted to help by stealing bites of the filling. You're going to ruin the pH balance, she protested, swatting his hand away from the bowl. I'm quality testing. It's a crucial part of the process. Is that what we're calling it now? The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the life they'd built together in this house that had once been just a beautiful dream. The walls were covered with photos now, their real wedding pictures, family gatherings, candid shots from the honeymoon in Tuscany where Colton had learned to make pasta and Nia had discovered she was terrible at Italian but excellent at wine tasting. The reporter is coming at 2, Colton reminded her, reading emails on his tablet. Are you ready for the interview? As ready as one can be to discuss elaborate corporate deception with a business journalist. The story had broken 6 months after their wedding, when a disgruntled former employee had leaked details of their original arrangement to the press. The scandal had been brief but intense. Headlines about fake engagements and corporate manipulation, speculation about the authenticity of their marriage, questions about Colton's fitness to lead Brooks Industries. They'd weathered it together, presenting a united front and refusing to hide from the truth. If anything, the controversy had strengthened their relationship, forcing them to be completely honest with each other and with the world about how their love story had begun. Besides, Nia added, sliding the lemon bars into the oven, it's been 2 years. People are tired of the story. Are you? Tired of it? She looked at her husband, and the word still gave her a little thrill of happiness, leaning against their kitchen counter in weekend clothes, his hair mussed from sleep, reading business emails at 10 on a Saturday morning. He was exactly the same man who had offered her a fake engagement in an elevator, and completely different from him too. I'm tired of explaining it, she said, but I'm not tired of living it. The timer on the oven chimed, and as Nia pulled out perfect golden lemon bars, she felt the familiar rush of satisfaction that came from mastering something Catherine had taught her. Their relationship with Colton's parents had survived the scandal too, stronger for the honesty that had finally replaced all their careful performances. Maya's coming for dinner tonight, she announced, checking her phone. And she's bringing the new boyfriend. The artist? The poet. Try to keep up. Write poetry, I'll prepare appropriate conversation topics. Just be yourself. She'll either love you or think you're hopelessly bourgeois. After 2 years, I think we've established which category I fall into. An hour later, his sister burst through their front door with her husband in tow, practically vibrating with excitement. We're pregnant, Emma announced, throwing her arms around Nia. 12 weeks. Nia found herself overwhelmed by the fullness of her life. You're thinking too hard, Colton observed later, settling beside her on their sofa. I'm thinking about how different everything is from 2 years ago. Good different or terrifying different? Both. She curled against his side. 2 years ago, I was unemployed and convinced I'd never figure out what I wanted. Now I have a successful consultancy. Your parents ask my opinion on foundation business, and I'm married to someone who used to be my fake fiancé. Colton's arm tightened around her. Are we still pretending? Every day, she said, noting his flicker of concern. I pretend I don't get ridiculously excited when you come home from work. I pretend I don't still get butterflies when you kiss me goodbye. I pretend I married you for practical reasons instead of because I can't imagine existing without you. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never met? She asked. Every day. And it terrifies me. Because you think you'd be unhappy? Because I think I wouldn't know what I was missing. I'd still be that guy convincing himself that work was enough. Later that night, as they got ready for bed, Nia caught their reflection in the bathroom mirror. 2 people in matching pajamas, looking completely ordinary. We look so normal, she observed. Disappointing, isn't it? After all that drama, we ended up completely ordinary. I love ordinary. They climbed into bed, settling into their familiar arrangement, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. Colton, if we had to do it over again, would you still offer me that arrangement in the elevator? He was quiet for a long moment. No. I'd ask you to dinner instead. Properly. I'd court you the way you deserved, with flowers and thoughtful conversation. I'd tell you from the first date that I was falling in love with you. But then we wouldn't have our story. What do you mean? Our story, messy and complicated as it is ours. It's what made us who we are, what taught us how to fight for each other. She traced patterns on his chest. Besides, if you'd asked me to dinner that day, I probably would have said no. I was too scared, too convinced that men like you didn't fall for women like me. You were never broken, Nia. You were just temporarily misplaced. Maybe we needed the elaborate deception to get past our own defenses. Maybe we needed to pretend to be in love before we could admit we actually were. They drifted toward sleep, and just before she fell asleep, Nia realized that sometimes the best love stories began with the worst decisions. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time.